Many believe that inflation is simply the result of overspending, that people are buying too much stuff. And it's a natural tendency to see rising prices in a robust economy. People spend a lot of money, inflation happens. Well, of course, why not? That's what the government wants you to think. However, I want to prove to you, stick to this video, that inflation is all about control. That's the whole purpose of it. And the government wants control over you and me. Let's go ahead and start off by simply just defining inflation. A general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. And I think most people already know that, but let's go ahead and more importantly actually establish what causes inflation. Again, they want you to think it's actually from us buying too much. They think it's an arbitrary increase from, companies. Our government often blames companies for this, saying, oh, they're actually increasing prices, sometimes because of price gouging and because companies are evil. And of course, sometimes they do that, but that's not what caused the inflation. Because think about it. If the companies do increase their prices for price gouging, that will cause their specific products to go up in price. And of course, free market economy, people won't buy that stuff anymore. But either way, that's not going to cause overall inflation. In contrast to what they want you to think, you must understand that inflation is caused by one thing, not overspending, but by the government. And it all comes down to government overspending. Let's think about this. As the government overspends and they need money, they simply just print more. Let's go ahead and just pretend that overnight they doubled the amount of money in circulation and currency around the country. I mean, think about that. If that happens, that's going to make it so your buying power gets cut in half. So therefore, your groceries, just overnight, practically speaking, are going to cost twice as much. And that's inflation. And to make matters far worse, evil worse, they have actually established our entire assumption of wealth based on this thing called your credit score. They want you to think the economy is all based on your ability to borrow money. Borrowing money. Since when did that become the standard? But think about it. If you are truly wealthy, and I mean really wealthy, you don't need a credit score. You don't need credit. You can just go buy your house. You can simply go buy your car, your luxury yacht, vacation, whatever you want to with cash. And you don't need the credit score. It's only for people who want to borrow money. So think about this. Most of the population is not truly wealthy. Of course not. Very few are. So what do? We work toward becoming financially independent. And I will say good luck with that. I'm not saying it can't happen, but our system is designed to not let that happen. Instead, people do their best on this made-up system to get a higher credit score so they can charge all the things they want. Think about this. The majority of the population, when they buy a house, they buy it on credit. Get a 30-year mortgage. And they walk in, first thing, they're like, look, we're in our home. They get that feeling of being wealthy. But it's just a feeling because they technically don't own their home yet. That perceived ownership gives you a sense that you're better off. But that's all it is. It's just a sense. It's just a feeling. And it is a lie. Instead of buying a home, you just signed over 30 years of payments for that place, plus interest, obviously. And for many people, if not most people, it's more than 30 years. Because once you start getting going on the home, they actually think the value of their home's gone up, so they get these home equity loans to be able to fix up their home, and now they're actually looking at 35, 40, or 45 years to pay off their house. And it's really funny, because on credit applications, it gives you two options. Do you rent or do you own? How about the third option? I'm financing my home. Because you understand you do not own that home, the bank does. And if you don't believe me, then I dare you to miss a few payments and see what happens. The bank's going to take it over very quickly. And during the Great Depression, there were actually times where the banks called people on their loans and took back their houses, even people who actually were up on making their payments. And then worse, let's say you do have your home paid off. What about taxes? The government will always want their taxes. And same thing, you miss paying those taxes, and that home you spent so many years paying off will now become the government's as they auction it off. It's all a lie. How about buying a car? So ridiculously expensive for a new car, by the way. And you have payments for 5 years. I mean, it used to be 5 years, didn't it? Now it's like 6 or 7 years. It's simply just a way it makes your payments less, but now actually paying far more interest in the long run. And then after 7 years, you finally have it paid off, yay, and it's on its last legs. At least that's what they want you to think, that your car is no longer as dependable as it used to be. Time to trade it in. You can use the equity in the car to buy a new one. And of course, the trade-in, the value for the car is practically next to nothing. It's peanuts, especially compared to what you paid into it. This is a system invented to keep you and me as slaves. All right, back to the credit score. What does it do for you? It makes it so the higher the credit score, the more expensive a house you can buy. That's great, right? No, the more interest you'll be charged because the more interest is based on the higher principal. The credit system is not to help you, it's to help the banks while keeping you enslaved. So in consequence, more and more people are becoming dependent on credit. And we're seeing this happening right now as we speak. Most people's savings have already been depleted, and they can't actually afford some of the most basic of necessities because of the higher prices and inflation. So what do? They get loans, and the worst kind of loans to pay for their basic things of food, credit cards. Their interest rates are the worst. Of course they are. And to make matters worse, not better, during these high times to be able to curb inflation, the federal government does what? Increased interest rates, making it harder to get loans, making it harder to even actually pay for food. They claim that the economy is too robust and people are spending way too much money. And that's what causes inflation. It's just the opposite. The government is spending way too much and the dollar is not worth as much. And so what do? Stop spending? No, of course not. They raise interest rates, so we're the ones that actually get in trouble by not being able to afford things like houses and cars. It makes loans more difficult, less people in homes, less people can afford a dependable car to get to work, less people who can afford food. And that's exactly what we're experiencing right now, isn't it? And what's the government doing to help us out? Pushing through another $1.7 trillion omnibus bill to simply pay for all the spending of whatever they want. It's like a blank check for them, and they love it. Then the feds do what they can do to help it out. Not to help it out. They raise interest rates again, making it more difficult for you and me. Why? The government's one spending the money, not us. And then here's what happens. The government has this huge spending spree. Sometimes throw you a stimulus check or try to pay off your student loans. And they get to look like the hero in those times of trouble when it was the government that caused it in the first place. It's like the worst kind of false flag. And here's where all this leads. As the government continues to overspend, inflation will continue to rise. Not from consumer spending like they claim. As inflation rises, the people make less and less, have less buying power. They begin to use credit for everything, including food. The feds increase interest rates, making it more difficult for the people to get the loans. The high interest rates mean less and less people be able to buy things like houses and cars and necessities like food. And as all this develops, your credit score drops. Less money to buy things, less credit to afford things like a home or car or the essentials, and the more they will have to depend on the government for all their needs. See how this works? Needs from the government means more overspending on welfare programs, making themselves, the government that is, look more like heroes. And the cycle continues to worsen. It's all part of their plan to eventually make it so everybody depends on the government for all their needs. That is their plan and direction they're going. Because eventually everyone, and I mean everyone except for the super wealthy, will have to depend on the government for all their needs, all of them. And when the government trounces on your freedoms and rights, well, guess what? There won't be a thing you can do, because at that point, the government is in complete control. That is their plan. That is why we have inflation.